Donald Trump is either historically unpopular or historically popular. And that's going to basically depend on which media you're reading. President Donald Trump is either historically unpopular or historically popular, and a lot of that just depends on which media you're reading. The dueling narratives on this front, they're about as opposite as you can get. And ABC News, one example of this, ABC declared Trump has lowest 100-day approval rating in 80 years poll. And it writes that 39% of respondents in this ABC News/Washington Post/Ipsos poll said they approve of how Trump is handling his job as president, down 6 percentage points from February, while 55% say they disapprove. It says the previous low in approval for a president at or near 100 days in office in polls, and it says dating to 1945, was Trump's 42% in 2017. Now look, CNN also reported with their own poll, and they say CNN poll Trump's approval at 100 days lower than any president in at least 7 decades. And look, briefly as a reminder on that, CNN also found in a recent poll that favorability for Democrats is also at record lows. So I don't know, from that perspective, maybe Americans are just, at least according to them, statistically not happy with kind of either side right now. But if you go by recent polls from Reuters and Ipsos, New York Times and Siena, CBS and YouGov, or Pew Research, basically they're all showing relatively the same numbers. They showed Trump with anywhere from around 53% to 59% disapproval ratings. But the discrepancy with Trump's polling is becoming a point of debate in and of itself. And that's because other polls are showing, well, the opposite, actually. Another recent poll from British media showed a very, very different picture. A poll last month from Daily Mail and JL Partners, it showed the numbers were basically flipped. They had Trump at 54% approval rating, only 46% disapproval rating, kind of down partisan lines, really. And it declared, quote, Donald Trump is more popular than ever, according to Shock Poll. So which is it? The least popular president in history or more popular than ever? Which do you believe? So what's going on with this? Well, that also depends on who you ask. The narrative for most of the legacy media, they're saying basically with these numbers, they're saying that Americans are worried about the economy. And they're saying a lot of the recent drop is around fears of a recession. They're saying it's, the tariffs, effectively. And it's possible that the up and down we're seeing in the stock markets from the tariffs are causing some of that, although it should also be noted that the market has actually gone back up again, although, look, it's been all over the place, frankly, lately. But others are also arguing the polls may not be accurate, and some are noting the broader problem of just polling overall. During most of the U.S. elections, going back at least a decade, remember what the polling was like when Trump was running against Hillary Clinton. Who was the projected winner and about by how much? They were expecting Hillary Clinton was going to win by a landslide. Polling was showing it. Same thing in, well, most of the other elections. Polling has really been shockingly inaccurate. It's been incredibly inaccurate. And among the few polling organizations that actually did get things right for the most part has been Rasmussen Reports. And they're alleging the problems at the polls are not just errors, they're actually alleging it's propaganda. In a recent post, the organization noted how this appeared during the 2024 elections between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Here's what they said. They said 2024 polling revisited, manufactured political propaganda. They say Rasmussen Reports managing editor, quote, while I do remember what it was like when we were reporting the presidential horse race numbers weekly, the new data would come in, open it up, and every week, Trump +2. The challenge is trying to find something in the crosstabs that might be newsworthy because of the top line remains static. They said that there was no news in it. Meanwhile, you had so many other pollsters showing Harris +4 or +5 or even +6. And the individual said, I was becoming worried. How come we were not seeing the kind of movement these other polls were reporting? In other words, when Rasmussen was looking at the numbers, they were seeing +4 Trump, and that was basically what they were seeing. But when they were looking at data from other polling organizations, it was showing the polar opposite. It was +5, +6, +7 Harris. And they were saying, well, what's wrong with our data? Why are we getting different results than these other organizations? And they said this: only in hindsight was it apparent that the whole joy/momentum thing for Harris in the August-September polls was a fabrication, a statistical mirage manufactured as political propaganda. This is according to David Plouffe's subsequent confession. It says that the Harris campaign's own internal polls never showed them ahead. That actually did come out publicly, by the way. And they say is the nail in the coffin of the mainstream polling racket's credibility. That's Robert Stacey McCain. Effectively, what they're saying is that when you have a political narrative come out, most popular candidate, they're trying to drum up their support, really. News organizations, they're alleging, basically cooperate with certain polling organizations and help fabricate that lie. That is the allegation here. And with the recent polling, Rasmussen also broke down what they're seeing in the polls right now. They note that while Trump's approval rating does seem to have dropped recently, the whole narrative about this being a historic low is actually a lie. They say it's not accurate. The polling is not necessarily great for Trump right now, but the numbers are not technically unusual historically for a president around this time during a second term. Remember, the whole narrative is, lowest approval rating at the 100-day mark. Mark Mitchell of Rasmussen Report said this, quote, "The MSM, mainstream media, will use any trick in the book to sandbag Trump approval, but the votes don't lie," and includes all the data there. Now, Mark Mitchell also elaborated on this even more in an interview on Benny Johnson's The Benny Show. Watch this.
What's really wild to me, if you have it available, is the Google search trends of Trump approval.
Yeah, we got it. You already got it, Quan. You already got it loaded.
This is one of the most stunning things that tells me a psyop is happening, because when those this is organic search volume of Trump approval. And it's like, oh, wow, it's spiking. If you look at the numbers, it's second or third highest month in all of Google's search history, going all the way back to 2004. But look at Obama. Look at Biden. Look at Bush. Nobody cared about their approval. There's something very specific about Trump, and there's something very specific about right now where it's like, well, we know cynically they don't have really much political power. And so all they have is their mouthpieces just drone away trying to undermine the anti-establishment candidate.
So what is this, right? Is it a psyop? Is it them in denial? You tell me, right? Which side is right? But based on the information, it does seem that some of it, at least, is being misrepresented, in terms, at the very least, of how Trump's polling compares to other presidents. And also the tariffs, they definitely did have an impact. Although if those get worked out and new trade deals get made, which they say people are lining up to do, over 70 countries at least, well, maybe things will bounce back. And so we'll see how long this downward polling trend works, or whether the media is going to maintain it. But on this point, though, polls actually do matter. They might not matter so much in terms of giving you a real picture, but they can influence public opinion. And when it comes to the debates right now taking place, this is one of the big arguments. Why would they want to falsify polls? Why would they want to do that? It's because when people believe that everybody, the whole crowd, is for one thing and against something else, you feel like you're marginalized if you're, kind of the one liking something nobody else does. They can manufacture support. They can prop up a new candidate. They can prop up a product. They can make it seem that everyone is behind this new issue, even if people are not behind it. And they can then push things into the public sphere that people might not actually really go with otherwise. They can manufacture the illusion of support. And more importantly, they can also influence voter turnout. This is one of the big arguments when it comes to elections, by the way. One of the big arguments was it can disenfranchise voters. If people see that, hey, in New York, there's no way that my candidate is ever going to win, so I might as well not even vote. The polling works to disenfranchise the voter. If media and pollsters can manufacture a narrative, that narrative can also start to have a real impact on public perception. And it's in this context, Donald Trump is now demanding investigations into the polling organizations. This is what he said on Truth Social. He said, great pollster John McLaughlin, one of the most highly respected in the industry, has just stated that the failing New York Times poll and the ABC Washington Post poll about a person named Donald J. Trump are fake polls from fake news organizations. He says the New York Times has only 37% Trump 2024 voters, and the ABC Washington Post poll has only 34% Trump voters, unheard of numbers unless looking for a negative result. In other words, they're not polling on an accurate picture of the president. If they're polling only 37% of people who voted for Trump in 2024, then maybe they're not going to get higher than 37% of actual support for Trump. That's the narrative here, right? If Washington Post only has 34% Trump voters, and that's the basis of their poll, and they're showing 39% support, that means that not only has Trump retained all of his supporters, it means that he has actually gained new ones. But the polling, because they did not make it properly balanced, is not demonstrating that. That is the narrative coming from Trump right now. He says these are unheard of numbers unless you're looking for a negative result. He says which they are, he alleges, right? And he adds, quote, these people should be investigated for election fraud, and we'll see if that happens. But he said in the Fox News poll, while you're at it, he said they are negative criminals who apologize to their subscribers and readers after I win big, much bigger than their polls showed I would win, lose a lot of credibility, and then go on cheating and lying for the next cycle, only worse. In other words, what he's accusing them of is effectively using misleading polls for political purpose. And he's alleging it's even a form of election fraud. Again, as I mentioned, part of the argument with polling is that it can disenfranchise voters. It can manufacture support if you believe that, AOC and Bernie Sanders right now, for example, they have, big events. They're getting allegedly thousands of people. Is that real? Is it not? Some people have questioned it. But the point is you can actually manufacture things like that, manufacture support, and push individuals to the front of a political party by, again, creating the illusion of support. I'm not saying that they're faking that, but I'm using that as an example, of course. And also, again, if you want to manufacture a poll and you only poll, let's say, 20, 30% of the people who like the thing you oppose, and 70, 80% of the people you poll are people who agree with you, what is going to happen with your poll? Well, obviously, it's going to reflect the 70-30. Obviously, it's going to reflect the narrative you premeditated, right? And of course, that is then used politically as propaganda. And it's interesting now that all the media seems to be kind of working in lockstep doing this. Is that intentional? Did they all use the same method that Trump is alleging that they used? Well, that's a real question here. And of course, if they do investigate this, I don't know what the laws would be in terms of election fraud, but remember, Trump is actually suing some of these news outlets. He's suing them, for example, for misrepresenting information as ways of effectively changing, again, votes, right? For example, 60 Minutes altering their interview with Kamala Harris in such a way that would make her sound better on camera than she actually did sound, even splicing audio and putting things together to make her sound more coherent. While with Trump, he's alleging they've done the opposite. This is important because, again, that actually does violate some laws with some of these organizations. If you have a TV newscast and you're on television, there are certain laws in place that would prevent you from kind of messing with information like that. You have to give equal representation during elections specifically, and if you fail to do that, you can lose your broadcasting license. And so it's not clear whether Trump is actually going to take action on this. It's not clear whether he's going to do anything with it. But he is, at the very least, alleging that something has been done wrong, and he is saying that he wants to have it investigated. So we will see if anything happens.
In a world of code and screens and lights, hidden truths wear digital masks. City of the binary nights, awake from the programmed tasks. Eyes open wide to the glitch in the seams, planets grab the mirror cage. Truth isn't what it seems. Find yourself beyond the digital age. Break the matrix, break the mold. Riddles in the code